Hello everybody, Shinjo here, and welcome back to Anime Crossover. In case you're not familiar with this series, which I wouldn't be surprised if you're not, because I've only done 3 videos about it about half a year ago. But in this series, I take different anime characters and discuss what I think their decks would be if they would be in the Yu-Gi-Oh universe, or if they would be in the Pokemon universe, what their ace Pokemon would be. I've done this previously, discussing what ace Pokemon the Yu-Gi-Oh characters would have, and what decks Ash and his companions would have. I'm gonna try and keep these themed in the videos that I discuss them, and that's why today's is gonna be all about shonen. It could be a shonen protagonist, it could be any character in any shonen, and that's what we're discussing today. We are going to start this with Alphonse Elric from Full Metal Alchemist, specifically Brotherhood, because that's the one I've seen. So what I decided would be perfect for his deck in the Yu-Gi-Oh universe and his ace Pokemon would be these two. For Yu-Gi-Oh, I opted for the Koki Mirrors, mainly because I like the playstyle of them. I'm trying to build a deck IRL right now, but also I like it as a cool little reference to Alphonse in his robot form with the core inside of him. I feel like that's a really cool thing. And I feel like an iron core could be compared to the Philosopher's Stone, which is another nice little reference. And obviously based off of design, you can see why I went with Golurk. It just makes a whole lot of sense based off of similarities to Alphonse in his robot form. So up next we have Goku. I'm surprised in the videos that I've discussed so far, I never even considered going for Goku. But since this is a shonen video, I feel like it's only fair. So for Goku, this probably isn't going to be a surprise on the Pokemon side, but here's what I went with for his decks. Obviously, ace Pokemon, Infernape, obviously based off of Sun Wukong, the same thing based off of Goku, it makes perfect sense, and the fact that he's a monkey. But for Yu-Gi-Oh, I went with the Battle and Boxers, because that just makes a lot of sense. Any fighting based deck would make perfect sense for Goku to have. And I decided to go with the Battle and Boxers because it's a deck that I could see Goku actually using. And the fact that a lot of them are fire attribute, which plays into Goku's Kaioken as well, it's a really nice touch. The next shonen character we have here is Ichigo Kurosaki. So, full transparency, I know the new season is out, the 1,000-Year War, or the 1,000-Year Blood War, whatever it's called. I just started watching the show in general. After, what was it, almost 20 years of the show being out, I'm finally getting around to watching it. I'm probably not even 20 episodes in, but from what I've seen, I'm really enjoying it. So obviously I had to look up information on what to use for Ichigo's deck and Pokemon, because I'm not as familiar with the show in general. So here's what I went with for Ichigo. I feel like in the Yu-Gi-Oh universe, it would make perfect sense for him to run a Chaos deck focused on bringing out Blackluster Soldier Envoy in the beginning. If you're not familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh, that monster can only be summoned by removing a light monster and a dark monster, and I feel like that duality makes perfect sense for Ichigo, especially considering that I know he has a sort of dual personality sort of thing with the mask that he wears, which that's also the inspiration for why I gave him a Dusclops. I feel like that makes sense. Initially, I wanted to go for a Marshadow, but I decided against it. Marshadow would make sense considering it's a ghost type that fights other ghosts, but I feel like Dusclops works a whole lot better, especially since Dust Noir's Pokédex entries talk about sending Pokemon and other things to the Netherworld. I just feel like it would be a perfect fit. The next character that I'm discussing is Inosuke from Demon Slayer. So I didn't want to have it be multiple characters from Dragon Ball, multiple characters from Bleach, all these different shows. So I wanted to have at least one from each shonen that I have seen, and if I haven't, at least make something up that'll make sense. And I was initially planning on going with Tanjiro, but I just like Inosuke a whole lot better. He's much more of a wild card. So what I decided to go with for Inosuke is Doublade for his Pokemon, because obviously he wields 2 swords. It makes perfect sense. I could have also went with Emboar because of the fighting type, but just based off of the dual swords, I feel like Doublade makes more sense. And for the Yu-Gi-Oh deck, I went with the For Hire deck because you can already see the similarities just based off of beat in the background. It's a really cool similarity to a Inosuke considering that the For Hire monsters are beasts that carry weapons. It makes perfect sense for Inosuke. I don't know much about the For Hire deck myself. I just know that I got completely mollywopped by it in Duel Links before, so I have bad memories from that. But I feel like the For Hire deck works well for Inosuke. That and the fact that there's no actual pig deck. The next character on the chopping block is Lloyd Forger from Spy Family. Yeah, this isn't gonna take too much brain power at all, so here's what I went with. Inteleon is obviously based off of a spy as well, so you can see the similarities with that. And for Yu-Gi-Oh, I went with the Spiral deck. I'm not sure about what it does at all. I just know that it's spy themed, so that makes perfect sense. Just like the Cookie Mirrors, another deck that I'm trying to build in real life. But yeah, this probably isn't going to be too much of a shock. There probably could have been something better that I could have done. I could have done like Remoraid or Artillery as a reference to Remoraid being a gun and Artillery being a tank. Inteleon just makes much more sense. Who else am I going to give Inteleon to in this show? But the next character is Meruem from Hunter x Hunter. So this one and another one later are the two that were recommended for me, and that's how I decided to make it a shonen video. So for everybody's Chimera Ant King, I decided to go with the Insectors for Yu-Gi-Oh! I think Insectors make sense because they have weapons. The Chimera Ants literally destroy people, and they're insect-like, so that makes sense. Empoleon I went with mainly because Meruem is at the top of the ladder. He's the big kahuna, the one in charge, the king. So Empoleon made sense in my mind, but thinking back on it, I probably should have gone with Nidoking as well, especially with the little stinger tail. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Do you think Empoleon works better, or do you think that Nidoking works better? I was also considering Cubchoo as a nice reference to Komugi, but I decided not to. The next character is Mirio from My Hero. This is the other one that was recommended to me. And of all characters, Mirio is definitely an odd pick. I'm definitely going to do Deku somewhere down the line, but not initially now. So here's what I went with for Mirio. I'm realizing after I wrote the notes, I already gave Surfetch to Yuma, but I feel like Surfetch makes sense because Pokédex entries talk about Surfetch being heroic and defending his friends, and that sounds exactly like Mirio. I could have done something like Kecleon that can transform and basically mold its body into wherever it needs to, like Mirio's quirk did. And I could have also done Vaporeon because it can do the same thing in water, but I feel like Surfetch makes sense, at least in my mind. And obviously based off of the name, for the Yu-Gi-Oh deck I gave him the Heroics. It's not too much of a stretch to understand why. Mirio wants to be a hero, it all adds up. The next character here is Shinra Kusakabe from Fire Force. This one I had a lot of fun with. Obviously you could tell initially based off of Shinra that his Pokemon would be a fire type. Well, you're wrong. Here's what I did. For his Yu-Gi-Oh deck, I gave him the Fire Fist because he literally fights fire. It makes sense. And I decided to go with Hitmontop because I never thought about this until I read about it online. Shinra's fighting style takes a lot of cues from, I'm definitely going to mispronounce this, Caporia, which is the same thing that Hitmontop is based off of. Basically when you stand on your head and twirl around like Hitmontop does and how Shinra does in the anime. So I feel like that makes sense. And I feel like Hitmontop could at least get one fire move in his arsenal, and if he doesn't, then that makes things even worse. But we're down to the last two people, if I have my list right. And up next we have, how do you pronounce this? Grinbarial? I never actually knew what his last name was. I don't even think Asta has a last name now that I think about it. But he's from Black Clover. Yuno is Asta's rival, and I don't know how the show ends because I didn't get to the end of the show yet. but Yuno is definitely a character that grew on me more I watched him. I didn't like his stoic personality at first, but I did appreciate it more as I watched. So here's what I did for his team. For the life of me, I don't know why of all people I decided to give him a legendary, because there is only one other person in this video that gets a legendary, and I hesitate on giving Yuno a legendary. I mainly did it as a nice reference to the Golden Dawn, and the fact that Ho-Oh is the mascot of Pokemon Gold, it makes perfect sense. And the Phoenix sort of thing I like as well. And for his deck, I don't know why I gave him the Heretics. I just feel like that would be a deck that Yuno would use. I feel like in the Yu-Gi-Oh universe, if Asta and Yuno were in there, Asta's would be more beatdown sort of style, and Yuno would be more strategic, using his erratic monsters, using their special abilities, dropping their points to 0, bringing out high level monsters, and overwhelming Asta. But I saved the best for last, you could argue. For the last spot here, it is Yusuke Urameshi. I'm really glad that I watched through Yu Yu Hakusho so I can have a clear idea of what I wanted to do for Yusuke. So here is the team that I gave Yusuke. Here is what I did for him, and he is the other person in this video that has a legendary. He is literally a spirit detective. He fights other spirits, so Marshadow makes absolute perfect sense. There isn't anything else that I could have given him. Well, there is one thing, but Yuno already took it. But for his Yu-Gi-Oh deck, I went with the Nepotus deck. I don't know how you pronounce it. I can never pronounce it right. But I went with that as a nice reference to how it's based off of a Phoenix and how Yusuke died and got reborn as a spirit detective. I just feel like this works so well for Yusuke. And the fact that he's hot-headed doesn't hurt. Those are the 10 anime characters in this video. I want to end this by saying there are obviously better options that I could have given for some of these characters. Some are a lot more on the nose with the reference, like Inosuke wielding 2 swords, so he has Doublade. But some are more visual, like Alphonse and Golurk. There are some that are just a weird stretch, like Yuno and Heretics. I did the best I could, but at the same time, there are, especially with the Yu-Gi-Oh decks, there are new decks that could come out. There could be old decks that I didn't think about, that I could have included in other videos. But I feel like with what I did in this video, I'm satisfied with it. Let me know what you think about my choices down below. If you have any other ideas for things I could do for this, let me know down in the comment section. I'm just letting you know now, the next episode is going to be primarily anime women or girls. So let me know if you want to include any specific ones for that next video, and I'll see you next time. Momentai.